when it comes to achieving your goals and pursuing your dreams, having a support system is so key and paramount. And that support system is going to look different for everybody. And the bigger the support system you have, the better, in my opinion, your chances are of being successful.
That is TJ, the Quad City Magician, this week on the Do It For Yourself podcast. Hey, my friend, welcome back to another episode here on the Do It For Yourself podcast. My name is Ian. I am your host, and this is my podcast. Really quick, I just want to say I hope that you are all doing well. You are doing what you can to get through this rough time that we are in. And if you had a minute to check out the Positivity Pod, I hope that landed well with you and you enjoyed it and you really felt the positivity, because that was my goal with that podcast. I really wanted to share some good positive vibes with everyone during this weird time. So I hope that landed well with you. And before I get into my guest for this week's episode, I just wanted to take a minute to ask you for a quick favor. If you could, please leave a review on whatever app it is you are using to consume this podcast. It's something that's really quick and really easy to do, but it's something that is going to help me out, and it's going to help the show out a ton in spreading the word and getting this podcast out to the people who need it, want it, or I guess want to come join us. My guest this week is TJ, the Quad City Magician. And TJ's journey into magic actually is not one that you would typically hear of when you hear that someone is a magician. Most magicians are into magic or have been into magic since they were a child. And TJ's story is a little bit different. He actually did not get introduced to magic until a little bit later on in life, when he was working at a group home, and he had to come up with a creative way to keep the residents entertained. And so he learned a few magic tricks, and he began showing them to the residents where he was working. But as any good magician knows, you can't do the same trick twice, because then people start to figure it out, or at least they try to figure it out. And so this was the birth of his love for magic and learning new tricks. And TJ has since gone on, and now he has a business. He is a traveling magician. He does shows all in his area for companies, groups, homes, and he has built a business just off of learning a few magic tricks for a job that he used to be working at. And so we get a chance to dive into his story, what he's up to, and how he is still using magic to now have a career. So without further ado, here is my interview with TJ. All right. Well, TJ, I am really looking forward to sharing your interview on the podcast this evening. I actually had a previous interview with someone who was a mentalist on the podcast, and that was a first for me. I had never had anyone who was a mentalist here on the show. And now we are leading into another realm of entertainment, and you are a magician. So give us and the listeners here a little bit of a introduction as to who you are and what you're up to.
Sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm really excited. My name is TJ, and I perform as the Quad City Magician. And so I started performing magic when I was about 23 years old. And I guess that's not exactly right. I didn't perform. I learned my first trick when I was 23 years old because I began working in group homes for children with special needs. I figured out that they had a lot of free time on their hand, and I needed to find ways to keep them busy during their free time so they wouldn't get into trouble. I convinced my brother to teach me one magic trick. I took it to the group home, performed it for the kids there. They loved it, and I was hooked.
And so your brother knew magic. Was this something that he was very passionate about, or was he that kid that got a magic kit for his birthday or Christmas at a young age and he knew a few tricks that he could teach you?
Yeah, so he got into it, I'd say, around the age of 8.5 or so. And he had been performing shows for Cub Scout groups and practicing for a long time. And my mom would take him to the magic shop and stuff like that. So, yeah, he had been doing it for a while. And I got him to teach me one of the tricks that he had recently purchased from the magic store. And uh, yeah, and the funny thing is that, like, he's not even doing magic anymore.
Okay, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, he just kinda grew out of it, as he got older and stuff like that, and, um, doesn't do magic anymore, although he's still very interested in it, like, watches the TV specials, America's Got Talent, and things like that, but doesn't perform, so
And so I want to take a couple steps back and kind of learn about you as a, middle school, high school age kid, and some of the things that you were into, and how you ended up working at this group home.
yeah, well, so, eh, middle school actually is right around the time that I got interested in sports. Um, I I didn't see myself as an athletic kid, but my aunt was dating a guy who kind of called himself a track star. And I thought, I could do track. So he got me interested in running, and we actually worked out together at the track here and there. And I had joined the track program at school, track and cross country, because I wasn't fast, but I thought I could do long distance and maybe outrun people, outlast them. And I was really into it. In high school, became the captain of the cross country team. And we did 2 workouts a day, even at one point, because as a team, we were very committed to trying to make the state championships.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, and like at that point, like all my entire social group was runners, and um, my friends from track and cross country and stuff like that. Um, and we just did stuff like going to movies, normal high school stuff. And I was not into magic at that point at all. I was pretty consumed with running, in fact.
And so when you started thinking about college, did you have this consideration of continuing your running career into college? Maybe even using that to parlay into some like a scholarship, or maybe, not a full ride, but your team was pretty good. You were working towards getting to the state championships every year.
Yeah. So my intention in high school was to go on to college as a track and cross country athlete, and to perhaps even continue beyond that, because I was really into it. um, I went to junior college at first and actually convinced the athletic department at the junior college to start a cross country team. They did not have one when I began attending there. So they started one, and it was a small team. In fact, we almost couldn't even run as a team. There might have only been 5 of us. So we had just enough people to score. um, And I had a friend who was going to a 4-year school, and I think that we had a number of conversations over the phone, and I kind of was jealous, envious of the experiences he was having living
Mhm.
away at school.
Mhm.
So I started pushing the idea of going away to 4-year school, and discovered Benedictine University in Lisle, Illinois. And it's a Division 3 school, so they didn't have scholarships or anything,
Okay.
but they understood my financial situation, and the coach was able to talk with the admissions department and stuff like that and find a way to get me some grants to help pay my way.
And I'm assuming that is why you decided to go to junior college at first was because of your financial situation and then go on to a 4-year university.
Yes, yeah, that was one of the big considerations was the financial piece, because my parents told me very early on in life that with what they did for a living and stuff like that, that if I wanted to go to college, they would certainly support the idea, but that I would have to pay my own way.
But there was no, pressure to go to college from them.
No, no, it was they always I think they kind of taught us pretty much the standard thing as I was growing up, that if you want to get a good job, you go to college. Um, but you can be whatever you want to be. So I, I'm not really sure how to explain it any other way than that.
Mhm.
Just, you know, it was college is an opportunity that's there for you. We know with our financial situation that we're not going to be able to help, but that you can certainly do that, and you'd have to pay your own way. So I grew up like I had my first job actually when I was very young, under 15 years old, helping my dad in the kitchen of a restaurant where he worked. And then when I was 16, I went and worked at a Wendy's, um, and just kind of worked a lot in my younger years, picking up a lot of extra shifts and things like that. And then even when I went on to 4-year school at Benedictine University, um, I encountered some more financial trouble with the tuition,
Mhm.
because I think something happened with loans where I had to find a way to pay more out of pocket because I was getting less money from federal loans.
Mm.
So I got a job at the YMCA running their before and after school program, watching kids before school and after school while their parents were working.
So that's interesting, and just out of curiosity, when you went to college, what was your degree in?
Uh, so I had so many different paths when it came to college.
Okay.
When I initially went to college, it was to do sort of like chemistry. I wanted to work in like a hospital laboratory. Um, but I had trouble with the academic side of things. So then I ended up changing majors, and I wanted to become a teacher.
Mhm. That's why
But
I asked.
yep. But by then I had gotten so far behind academically that my GPA was just not going to allow me to be a teacher.
Okay.
So I ended up changing majors even again. And when I graduated, I got a Bachelor of Arts in Social Science.
So I did the same exact thing that you were just saying. Now I went to school to be a teacher and was a teacher from the start. I majored in education, but when I was at a 4-year university, I did the same exact YMCA program that you're talking about. I would go
That
and do the before school care, and they liked that I obviously had experience being around students, but then on top of that, I was somebody that was reliable who would get to the school because the students usually aren't supposed to be at school until I don't even remember. Let's say it's like 8 or 8:30. Well, the parents would drop them off around like 7 o'clock so that they could get to work. So they needed somebody who was going to be reliable, who would show up, and who had experience helping students to go run the before school care.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
And that's it's funny because, I haven't even thought of that or, you know, reflected on that, until you had just brought it up, so that's interesting.
Well, it worked out really perfect for me because um, I got up in the morning like at 6 a.m. and I think I had to start at 6:30 at the school, which was literally walking distance from the college campus.
Mhm.
And after that, then I had to go to practice.
Okay.
And then I would have my classes and stuff. And by the time my classes were getting out, school was getting out at the elementary school, and I would go to work.
And then yeah, because you would have to do the aftercare, and
Yep.
then would you have practice in the evenings again?
Yes.
Okay. So you'd have practice after you got done with the students?
That's right. Yep.
Okay, yeah, okay, so that ooh, man, those are some long, long days for you. Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's like, you're up, got a couple hours worth of work, then you got class, or practice, then class. I mean, those are long days, and I mean, just being a student athlete is enough, but you throw in working, maybe not full time, but putting in a decent amount of hours through the course of your college time. That's no easy task. Doing all three together, um, I can't imagine doing that. I was the same as you. I worked all through college while I was going as well. And just between college and work, it was one of those things where it was, I mean, man, you get home from the end of the day. I'll tell you what, you certainly didn't have any problems falling asleep back then.
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
And so, did um, the interest to begin working at this group home come from some of that passion from working with the students as part of the before and after program?
Yes, I think I kind of discovered that through that process that no matter what I did when I finished college, that I would try to find some way that I could work with kids.
Mhm.
And when I finished college, I ended up doing some coaching, some private coaching on the side for a local high school student that my dad met at the restaurant where he worked. He met his mom and dad, and they were really they really supported their son and his ambitions to succeed at running and sports and stuff like that. And so they hired me to help train him during the off season when he wasn't competing with his high school program. Um, and that kid's aunt worked at the group home where I eventually ended up working.
Mm. Okay.
Um,
And go ahead.
I had that connection, and it just made sense because they were working with kids, and I wanted to work with kids, and so I took it, and it was awesome. I worked in group homes with kids and adults for about 20 years.
And so what were some of the things that you were doing before you got into magic and started performing tricks for them?
Well, so right when I got out of college, I worked in retail a little bit. And I also worked in restaurants because that's what my dad did my whole life. And that's what I did too, first starting out, because I started at Wendy's and then I eventually went and worked at the same company that my dad worked at. They had a number of restaurants in the area. Um, so I did that. And then when I started working in the group home, um, like I said, I didn't expect that there would be so much free time. The kids would come home from school, and because they were in special ed programs, they didn't often have a lot of homework and stuff like that to occupy their time. So it was television, board games, things like that. And so I convinced my brother to teach me a trick, and that's when it was kind of all downhill.
And so obviously when you learn this trick and you can go back and you can perform it for them, um, how many times can you perform the same trick before the kids start to say, "Okay, well, what else do you have?"
Right. Yeah. So, and that's the thing about it. I did that one trick, and they wanted to see more because they liked it. So I had to figure out a way to start learning more magic tricks. So I started then going to the same magic shops that my brother used to frequent, and in fact, he and I would go together. And so I started learning that way, and of course, utilizing the library as well for some books and things like that. Um, and just and back then it was like I'd learn a trick just to perform it for those kids. And then if I didn't practice it, of course, I would forget it. So I was cycling through tons and tons of magic tricks that I would forget, a week later because I had already performed it. And after I performed it, I didn't practice it.
And you wouldn't repeat any tricks no matter what. If you learned a new trick and you performed it once, you would never repeat it?
Well, believe me, I made that mistake a lot in the beginning.
Okay.
So they tell magicians that we've got these three big rules, right? The first one, of course, is a magician never tells their secrets. The second one is that a magician never performs the same trick twice for the same person.
Okay.
And then the third one is to practice, practice, practice. Um, well, when you perform a trick and people love it, and you're young and new at doing magic, it's easy to let yourself be convinced to do it again because it feels good knowing that you got them, they liked it, they must have liked it because they want to see it again. And so I did early on, of course, do the tricks repeatedly sometimes for the kids at the group home or for my coworkers at the group home. And I learned pretty quickly that that wasn't working for me.
And what are the chances of someone figuring the trick out if you perform it multiple times for them? Obviously, the chances of them figuring it out increase with the number of times, but do you know what the chances are of them figuring it out if you continue to perform it for them?
Well, we have a saying in magic that the first time it's a performance, the second time it's a lesson.
Uh-huh. I
People,
believe that.
yep, people know what to look for now, and they're watching much more closely, and things like that. So, but it took me a long time to learn that stuff and to learn the restraint, to gain that ability to hold myself back. If someone likes the trick, hey, do that again. Back then it was so tempting, and I couldn't resist the temptation to do it again because they were having fun, and you could see the enjoyment on their faces. So
Well, and I wonder how much of it was enjoyment and loving the trick versus, "Okay, he got me that time, but I wanna figure this out. Let me see if I can get him to do it again," you know?
yes,
I mean,
yes.
I feel like some of it and I feel like I don't know this for sure, but I would have to assume that some of it has to be just pure curiosity. Like,
Ye-
pure and can I figure out what they just did?
yeah. Well, like I said, back then, I didn't understand all of that stuff. Nowadays, I can tell those audience members who are there simply because they want to try to figure it out. There's also people that have been sort of taught, whether it be by another performer or by family or friends or somebody that they've come into contact with somehow, somewhere, where they feel like the purpose of magic is to fool them. Okay. And the way I always put it is if the purpose of magic is to fool somebody, then essentially what that means is that its purpose is to make a fool of somebody, and nobody wants to be made a fool of. So I always try to approach my magic from the standpoint of this is just for entertainment, you guys. And in fact, I begin every one of my stand up shows with the following line. I say, gosh, you know what? To be honest, with all of the shows being canceled right now, I don't know if I can remember my line. um, I always tell people that when they see a magician, they think that our job is to trick you. When people see a magician, they think that our job is to fool you. That's not my job at all. My job today is to help all of you have a whole lot of fun. Would that be okay? Right? And I say that to the audience, and I'm hoping that subconsciously they understand that I don't care if they figure out how the trick is done as long as they had fun.
Now, you're performing these tricks at the group home, right? And you're performing them for the residents of the group home, you're performing them for some of the fellow employees of the group home. When does it start to expand beyond the group home and into performances outside of this, maybe let's call it even comfort zone that you were in?
So it wasn't really until I met my eventual wife. And I'll be honest, so I met my wife, and she found out that I knew magic, and she would ask me to do magic all the time while we were dating. And it was really she had to twist my arm to get me to do it. I was so shy back then and so nervous and scared that I would mess up and stuff like that. Um, she really had to twist my arm to get me to do any sort of magic. Eventually, we got married. We had a little girl, and about the time that she turned 3 years old, and she could tell the difference between an object being in your hand 1 second and gone the next. It's called object permanence. About the time she had developed that when she was 3 years old, I started doing magic for her, especially like when we would go out to eat because we would need things to do to keep her busy while we're waiting for the food and stuff. So I would do magic tricks for her. And to hear her laugh and ask me to do it over and over and over again, that's when I really started to get into, okay, this is something that I could do all the time. Maybe even something that I could do for a living. Because up until then, the thought of being a magician for a living had never ever crossed my mind.
And I was going to say, not even just the thought of doing it full time, but you didn't even have any aside from, performing at the group home, but you were performing at the group home as an employee. You weren't being hired as a magician there. So you hadn't even had any paid gigs at this time that the idea starts to pop into your head.
Correct. Correct.
And the thing that always fascinates me about that is when people tell me that they, want to do that. I've had multiple people who come from many, many different walks of life and they decide, okay, um, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to become a professional magician, or I'm going to put on this triathlon race, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. They get this idea in their head and they they pursue it. They go on to do it. So you had this idea and that was the spark, but what did you do to turn that spark into a full-blown fire?
Yeah, so this was shortly after we had moved from the Chicagoland suburbs, where I'm from, to the Quad Cities, which is it's in Illinois and Iowa. right? There's technically 5 cities. 3 are in Illinois, 2 are in Iowa, and it's makes up a fairly large metropolitan area of about 400,000 residents. Um, so we moved here, and I decided I was going to join the local magic club as sort of a starter to kind of try to figure out ways that I could start doing more shows. I knew that if I was going to perform shows for money, that I would need stage time. And I found out through the local magic shop owner that there was a club that met in the area once a month. And every time they met, the magicians would be invited to get up and perform a trick. So that was my opportunity to start gaining stage time. By joining the Magic Club, I met other magicians like me that were looking for any and every opportunity that they could to perform in front of an audience. So they kind of helped and mentored me along the way. And that's when I met a friend of mine who suggested that I offer my services for free to the local libraries. I did that. They jumped at the chance. And so I started performing at libraries for free. And before I knew it, people were calling me, offering to hire me. And that's kind of how the ball got rolling.
Now, when you are performing a trick in front of other magicians, how difficult is that as opposed to performing it in front of people who don't know magic in the least bit?
Well, back when I was younger and newer to performing magic for a live audience, it was very nerve-wracking because they a lot of times know how the trick is done.
Mhm.
Maybe they've seen it before. And so you really want to be careful not to mess up. Um, but what I learned from experience then is that because they know how it's done, even more important than the method at that point is the entertainment value. Because magicians love magic in general. And if you can entertain them, that's what really counts. So, with experience and time, I figured out that, as long as I can get up in front of them and be myself and be entertaining, it doesn't matter the rest of it. So it got easier. But initially, it's very nerve wracking because these are your peers. They know how it's done. You don't want to mess up in front of them and look silly. So, yeah.
But on the flip side of that, they know how it's done, so they can help you improve. It would be the same as, you know, when you were running cross country, going and running with somebody who was more experienced. You did it, right? Your aunt had a boyfriend that was running or was, very athletic, and you went to work out with him. He was obviously more experienced. He was older. He could help you and guide you along the way. And then now down the road, you did the same exact thing for your magic.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and the thing is when you first start performing for magicians, if your purpose is to perform for them, um, what I at the Magic Club, for example, I would perform and then I would ask for feedback afterwards. You know, what I found is that for the most part, they didn't want to come across as being a jerk, or they were cheerleaders all the time.
Mhm.
And so sometimes I feel like they didn't always give you their totally honest feedback. It took I had to really make the decision and the choice to find people from that group that would give me honest feedback. And to this day, even because I know that group really, really well at this point, and a lot of them are very good friends of mine. Um, e- Even now, years later, I know who I can go to get an honest opinion, and who that if I even if I go to them and say, "Give me your honest opinion," they're still just going to pat me on the back and leave out the cold hard truth.
And well, I think the important part to emphasize there is that you were seeking out people who were going to give you constructive criticism or constructive feedback. And how did you come to the realization that the people who were in the magic group and part of this club weren't maybe giving you 100% of the feedback that they wanted to or they could?
Lay audiences, people who are not magicians, performing in front of them told the real story.
And how so?
Their reaction to your performance.
So if they weren't excited, you would know that the performance was not as good as you thought it was because the people from the club were cheerleaders and they were always excited about it, maybe no matter what the case was, whether it was a great show or maybe it was average.
Yes. Yes, that's true, because I'll tell you, we've had even members that have been members for a very, very, very long time, and they get up in front of the group, and 75% of the time they make one or more mistakes during their presentation of their trick. And everybody still claps and laughs and cheers equally. And I feel, so don't misunderstand me. Like, those gentlemen, those people that get up and have the courage to do that should be applauded and encouraged for their efforts. Um, but what I'm saying is, even someone who so obviously messed up in the middle of their performance is still getting claps and cheers and laughter and pats on the back. Um, with a lay audience would not do that for him,
Mhm.
for them, for anyone that messed up like that. And trust me, I've had my fair share of mistakes in front of live paying audiences. And it's those experiences where they have told me, "Hey, I saw how you did that," or where their applause was not as enthusiastic as I would like it to be, or just you can tell from their reaction, and it's very that's so important for any kind of an entertainer to get it up in front of a lay audience, someone uh, who's not necessarily in the know, and do your thing and get their feedback, their reaction. That's what really matters.
And I mean, I can see that for sure, but I think also having that experienced person come in and give you real honest feedback on both your enthusiasm and your technical skills when it comes to performing the trick, I think that that's going to be beneficial as well. So, I mean, I would applaud you for going out and specifically seeking out individuals that you looked up to who could give you constructive feedback and help you grow, because that's what's going to progress your career, progress your skills. I mean, it's the same across all walks of life. It's not just magic.
Right. Yes. Yeah, and I'm thankful now that I have a handful of people that I can go to and get honest feedback on my performances. Um, and over the years too, I've had coaches and people that have looked at my act and given feedback and things like that, and I'm equally grateful for their assistance with developing my shows.
Coaches in like regards to performance coaches or magic coaches or both?
So I have had guys that, like, I send them a video of my show, and they will give feedback and pointers and critique and things like that. Um, in all of those, well, not all of those cases, in most of those cases, they are professional magicians themselves. I There was a time when I called the local college, and I guess you can't really say local. I mean, they're big university, big name university, and I got in touch with the drama department there, and I asked for a student, like a senior, that might be willing to come out and look at my show and write some notes from a theatrical, dramatic point of view. And that was really cool too. In fact, I had him help sort of direct one of my shows at a theater. That was really a fun experience. So
When thinking about all of this, right? Like, so when thinking about reaching out and specifically finding the magicians from this magic club who were going to give you feedback and finding at this university someone who's going to come and review your act from a drama standpoint, or looking at hiring coaches who are going to review videos of your performance, what inside of you drives that desire? Like, what do you think makes you say, okay, that was a good performance, or that was an okay performance, but I want to find this person and I'm going to give it to them to see what they think? Like, what drives you to constantly improve?
yeah, well, you know, that is a tough question. Let's see. The Sort of the first response that pops into my mind is that I'm constantly reminding myself that magic is a performance art. And I'm trying to respect that fact, that it's an art, that it should be thoughtful and meaningful. Um, and so I'm always careful to try and add an element of art into what I'm doing. And for me, that means even if it's a classic trick from years gone by, rather than doing it the same way that the old masters did it, I always try to put some piece of myself into that act. And in general, I'm very proud of the fact that I feel like even though a lot of what I do is inspired from the classics and the tricks that came before me, um, nobody can do those tricks the way that I do it because it's so true to who I am as a person.
And I think, obviously, if you're not striving to get better, um, you're going to end up going backwards, right? You're going to end up either staying the same and or possibly getting worse. But I think it's interesting to find out from all of the different folks who I get a chance to talk to what really, drives them to become the better version or the best version of themselves that they can possibly be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
And I want to kind of get into some of the specifics of magic and I'm not asking you to give secrets away. I know that that is, it's not something that you are here to do. But have you seen, and I can't remember the name of the show. I think it was something along the lines of Fool Me or See If You Can Fool Me. It was with Penn and Teller.
Yes, it's called Penn and Teller Fool Us.
Fool Us. Okay, there, that's what it was. So now these magicians come on, right? And they perform their trick. And then at the end, obviously the objective is to see if they can fool Penn and Teller. And Penn and Teller will dissect the trick, and then usually obviously it's Penn who's doing the talking, but um they speak in code. It's like a secret language. Do you know this secret magician language?
I am often familiar with what they're saying. Yes.
Ah, so where is it that you get to pick that up along the way?
Well, it comes from knowing and internalizing the knowledge that you gain as a magician. And the knowledge that we gain comes from books and videos and lectures and other magicians.
And
Yep.
okay, so because I feel like they use like people's names, but then they ask questions. It's very, very interesting. I mean, as you can tell, I am one of those people I'm just trying to figure out what they're saying. Like it's so confusing just being I'm the lay audience that's just there watching this, but I enjoy watching the tricks, but then it's at the end you're just sit there and you're like, what are they saying? Like this is this completely secret language.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and some of the names that they bring up, remember I mentioned the classics of years gone by.
Mhm. Mhm.
A lot of magic today is a magician discovering this classic effect, we call it. Okay, that by effect, basically that's what happened during the trick. A card travels invisibly from one table to the next table. That's the effect. um, so these effects are done by other magicians, and then I might read that effect and then put that into my show, but with my own spin.
Mhm.
So if you hear Penn and Teller mention names, it could be because they're trying to tell the magician that you did it the way that so and so did it 30 years ago.
Mhm. Okay. 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 Understood there. Understood. You also mentioned, about magic these days, and something that I wanted to bring up with you in regards to magic these days is, something like the internet. The internet can be a blessing and it can be a curse, and that is for anyone. But for you specifically, someone who is trying to perform tricks, has that been something that has helped you, or has it hurt you? Or would you say that it's maybe neither?
So when it comes to me performing tricks, um, I think it's more or less neither. But that question is a huge issue in magic in general right now. It's a very timely topic for the magic niche and magicians and performers. Um, yeah, for lots and lots of reasons.
My follow-up question for you was going to be, well, actually had a point that came up that I thought of, but I also have a follow-up question for you. The first thing that I thought of was when you put something out, like say you perform a trick and you put it out on the internet, that now gives people the opportunity to pause, rewind, watch it over, and the number one rule is you never do the same trick for the same person twice, right? So that's an issue because they could then sit there and watch it over and over again. But my follow-up question would be, at a time like this where all of your shows are being canceled now, the internet is something that could potentially help you during this time because you could still put on magic shows.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So as far as like watching a trick and rewinding it and watching it and rewinding it to try and learn the secret, I think each magician has their own way to approach that problem and look at that topic. Because, for example, there are magicians who still live and perform today who do not post any of their magic on the internet. That's like their policy. And that's how they keep that problem from becoming an issue for them.
Mhm.
But there are others who would say, well, you know, I'm going to leverage the internet as a tool for my magic. And if someone wants to take the time to pause it, rewind it, fast forward it, and try to discover the secret by watching my trick over and over and over again, well, there's nothing I can do about it. That might be their attitude.
Mhm.
And I say to each their own. If you want to put your magic on the internet, I think that's great because that adds to it adds to the interest, right? Because the farther our magic reaches, the more people we can connect to and impact with our performances, the better it is for our art.
Now, when it comes to building up your business and your initial hesitation that you had when it performing for your girlfriend at the time who was, now become your wife, um, I would imagine that you obviously you got over that fear, and I would have to say that part of that fear or hesitation was because it's a girl and you have a crush on her and you don't want to look foolish, right? I mean, we
Right.
all go through stuff like that, but you get over this and now you perform and I'm sure she has now become your cheerleader and roots you on and everything that you do. But how important was it for you to have her standing in your corner and supporting you when you came home and said, "I think I want to make this my job"?
Yeah. So without all of the sacrifices that she made early on, this would not have ever been possible. There was a time when I would get a phone call, and that same night I'd have to travel 3 hours to a gig with essentially no notice. And she would be like, "Yeah, absolutely, go do it. I mean, this is what you want to do, so I got your back, and go do it." So yeah, without her supporting and cheering me on, this would not be possible at all. So
And the misconception I think that some people have when they hear doing it for yourself is they automatically assume that it's something in a selfish way, right? Like this is what I want to do and I'm going to do it my way and I'm not listening to you. But on the contrary, it is you're chasing your dream, right? It's something that you have always wanted to do, and I think that, yes, it's important to do it for yourself and do it because it's your dream to chase, but I think on the other side of that, I think it's very important to also have a support system that you can fall back on during these times because you're going to lose that spark and you're going to lose a little bit of that flame, and you may need somebody who's going to give you a kick in the ass and say, "Hey, remember why you're here and how you got to this point."
yes, support system when it comes to achieving your goals and pursuing your dreams, having a support system is so key and paramount. And that support system is going to look different for everybody. And the bigger the support system you have, the better, in my opinion, your chances are of being successful. Um, and so for me, early on, my support was my wife, and now these other magicians, and just all of that stuff kind of works together to help for the overall goal, you know? And like you said, like it's part of performing for a living and doing magic is my dream, but it's also for other people as well, because especially in a time like this, like we said, people need an opportunity to disengage and kind of forget about their troubles, even if it's just for 3 minutes. They need to laugh and they need to smile and they need to have an opportunity to de-stress. And that's what we magicians provide people with our humor and our performances and things of that nature. So
I agree with you 100%, and it's always good to be pulling a bandwagon behind you while you're going through this journey so that there are people who can jump on and root for you and help and maybe even get off of that bandwagon and give it a push up the hill. You know, I think it's very important to pick up people along the way who are going to help you with this goal.
yeah, well, and at times like this too, as a performer, having a support system is really important because with everything going on in the world, it would be so easy for me right now to just start applying for jobs and leave the magic behind. But I'm not going to do that because I have a support of people who are reminding me that this will eventually pass, that I'll be able to get my magic out there again. And maybe it won't be in the same way that I had 3 weeks ago, but there will still be opportunities for me to perform my magic, for me to make people laugh and smile and forget about their troubles, even if it's only for those 3 minutes.
So before we sign off, and I have an opportunity to ask you my last question, that I like to ask my guests in one form or another. Please do me a favor and let everyone know where they can find you, where they can see what you've been up to, and maybe see a magic trick, maybe not.
Okay. Okay, sure. So I have a website and it is quadcitymagician.com. And I am, of course, on social media at facebook.com/ TJ Regal Magic. And I'm on Instagram. I am the Quad City Magician. And of course, I have a YouTube channel as well.
Which is interesting, as that is something that we were just kind of discussing. So people will have to get on there and see whether or not um, you have any of your tricks out there on the internet.
Yeah, on my YouTube channel, I have a mixture of performances and some information for magicians, young and old, including like magic product reviews and interviews and things of that nature. So,
And before we sign off, the last thing that I like to ask my guests in one form or another is, what does it mean to you, TJ, to be doing it for yourself?
well, um, I can't tell you how awesome it feels now after 20 years in social service to have essentially retired and created the lifestyle that I enjoy. Um, it's and that's what it means to do it for myself, right? Like I make my own schedule. Uh, I get to choose my own direction in business, and I just am so proud of how hard I've worked and kind of gotten to this level where I'm at, where I can do what I want to do when I want to do it, and it's all for me and my family, and it's awesome.
That is very, very awesome, and so congratulations to you for being able to do that, and for having the drive and the passion and the determination to get there and to get your magic career to that point. So, I want to just again take a moment to recognize you and say thank you for coming on the podcast this evening, sharing your story, and letting us know what you have going on.
Okay, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, my friend, that is it. That is my interview with TJ, the Quad City Magician. And I would just like to take a minute to say thank you to you, the listener, for coming and spending some time with us. I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you come back for another episode, or please feel free to check out some of the other amazing guests that we have had on the podcast. If you could, please do me a huge favor and leave a review on whatever app it is that you are using to consume this podcast. It is something that is very easy to do, but it's something that is going to help me out a ton, and I would greatly, greatly appreciate you taking the time to do that. Other than that, I hope that you are staying safe. I hope that you are staying healthy. That is all I have for you, and I look forward to having you back for the next episode.